Session today is on Agile initiating enterprise agility. So, in short, I would just say agility at workplace, a guide to getting started. So, today's session, we are talking about enterprise agility, right? And I like to emphasize one thing that's very exciting, I think, to many of you, and this word zero cost agile approaches. And I mean it, some of these costs, some of what you can do is zero cost, of course, some of which requires training. And that would mean that you will learn some tips on how to do this. And what is probably most important is you leave the session today understanding what agility is. And you can then use this to evaluate your organization's level of agility. And I mean that we've got a tool. We'll do that after lunch. And you will then see what can you do, a roadmap to become more agile. So that's what we will do in short today. A quick introduction about me, aside from where I live that you already know. I am an agile coach, trainer, consultant. I do agility work for companies, and that involves a broad segment of industries that I've served over the years. And a lot of these companies have come in the last, half of it have come in the last 3 years, I would say. And it's interesting because, agility has permeated across industries, and it's no longer the case where it's just IT alone. And that used to be the case before. And you will see a lot of companies, especially banks, the work I've done with, are really to do with non-IT work. And that's interesting. Then I'll share more of my experience later, and I'll also probably get some of your insights. Many of us here are very experienced in this call, and I think it's a shame if I didn't get you to share your experience as well. That would be nice to hear, right? And okay, so let's get the timing right. So we will break about 10:40 since we started 10 minutes later. We'll take about 10 minutes break about that time, and we have another break closer to 12 noon. And lunch break is 1 to 2. We'll have another tea break coming up about 3 o'clock. And though I said we will end at 4:30, but trust me, we will end earlier for sure. Okay, how much earlier? Can't tell for sure for now, but all you will know is we will end before 4:30. Right. So what are we going to do in the morning? The first half of the day, we will talk about just the what, the why of Agile overview. And we will also do something very interesting, 12 key takeaways. So you may have read or listened or gone for training if you have, some of you, but you will never find these 12 key takeaways anywhere. So that'll be something interesting to look forward to. And after lunch, we will start right away with Agile simulation. And I'm going to do a simulation live here in today's training for you. And that will take approximately 30 to 45 minutes. And the whole simulation is going to give you an idea of how some of these takeaways are applied in real life. Okay, so that'll be interesting to see. And then we will use a tool for you to evaluate your company's agility, because you might want to know where do we stand, right? And that is what we do to give you that understanding as to where you are. And then the next step will be to understand learning pathways. How do we upskill ourselves? And my learning pathways. And of course, we'll end with Kahoot. And moving on, just wanted, even though it's a free training, it's a one-day training, but I love if we could adhere to this so that we can maximize our time. And it will be great if you can have fun. And I hope you do, because I'm very passionate about Agile, and I think it's a space that there's a lot of growth in this part of the world, especially in Malaysia. And you are here because you probably know what and how important it is, and I'm sure you will benefit tremendously. My suggestion is to have your cameras turned on at all times, because that will be good for me to understand the facial expression, whether you are okay, whether you need some feedback. And by all means, please do message me on the chat to tell me if there's any doubts you have, any questions you may have, whatsoever. Okay, that's absolutely fine. So before I move on, I just wanted to check with all of you. Are we okay so far? And am I okay? We've got Afizal. Okay, Afizal, you're a multitasker. You can do work. I'm sure you can. Any other questions from the floor? Okay, if there are no questions, feel free to raise a thumbs up or just mention anything on the chat so I know. Okay, let's see. Any thumbs up coming out to see if it's okay, or thumbs down if it's not okay, that's fine too. All right, super good. Wow, you're giving me a lot of compliment, Nariman. Belum mula lagi dah super good, huh? Okay, thank you. All right, fun. Thank you. Okay, that's good because I do want to pause every now and then to just check the pulse and see if I'm doing okay and if you need some further input on my presentation. Okay, Wendy, thank you. All right, so I trust for those of you who did not mention anything, it's okay lah. So no news is good news. I take it that way lah. Okay. All right, now let's move on. Let's start with the real fundamentals. Where did this word agile ever been created? Well, officially speaking, it was coined in 2001. So ladies and gentlemen in this call, Agile is not that new, but it's not old either, right? Because it's just about 22 years. And back in 2001, these guys met in this place called Snowbird. It's a ski resort. They were having fun. At the same time, they came up with this called Agile Manifesto at that time. So this was back in 2001. But if you look at the literature, in fact, even as early as the 90s, people were already doing work on agility, as a matter of fact. So these guys were the founders. Some of them are not around anymore. Most of them are. So the big question that I will ask, or rather you probably want to know, is what is Agile, right? We hear this word all the time. And I think if you open up Google, and you get loads of different definitions, and some of which I think can be very confusing. Now, let me try and simplify this for all of us today. In the simplest of terms, I would say Agile is just this 5 words combined. Looking at engagement between the team and stakeholders, between the team and the leadership. So everybody is engaged. You're looking at strategy. A lot of strategy involved. In Agile, we talk about roadmap and things like that. There's planning involved. People who say in Agile we don't plan, they are very wrong. In fact, we plan all the time. Solution, it's very outcome driven. There's a lot of focus on the outcome, right? Very outcome driven. And the most important word I would say is this word called mindset. And I'd like to dwell on this word a bit more. What is a mindset? What is mindset? Well, in the simplest of way, I would say it's the Agile way of working. But what is the Agile way of working? Right? Can you just like press a button and today I become Agile? You don't, right? It takes time. It takes lots of probing. It takes lots of inner engineering. So what it is, it's a way of thinking. It's the way of feeling. and the way of doing. That's quite easy to understand, right? I mean, obviously, I've got to think in a way that is agile. Then I start to feel it, and then I do it, right? So it doesn't just happen that after a training, we can now start doing agile, because the thinking and feeling has to come first, right? So that is what I'm talking about when I use this word agility at workplace. Agile way of working is what we're talking about, right? Absolutely. So let me understand. Let's understand this word mindset. I think some of you are probably thinking, "Apa, any white mindset? What is this mindset?" Right? In a in a bit more detail, I would say, when people talk about a learning organization, you look at my slide here, you will see on the top is a learning organization where people are in the mode of continuous improvement. It's already in that mode. It happened. It's autopilot. You don't have to tell them, "Hey, do this, do that." They are learning on their own. They're sharing on their own. They're collaborating on their own. They're engaging with stakeholders in a way that they should be doing. So this is what we aim to be, right? But of course, we cannot get there right away, right? Which is why I said mindset is less visible. Can you see the word less visible? You can't see it because it's internal, but it's very powerful, because what comes out is a culture of agility, the way of working. So in short, I would say what we're talking about in this 1 day session, agility at workplace, is basically right up there. That is where organizations aim to be. Some of them have reached, some of them are getting there, many of them are far from there. So we will understand later on when we do the evaluation of your company's agility, you will understand where you are at that point. Right. So any questions so far? We've covered just one thing, really. What is Agile? I'm just checking on the chat. Question. Okay, I see that everybody is very silent. Okay, could just mean two things: that it's so clear that you understood me completely, or I made you so confused that you have also no questions. I hope it's the first one. Huh? Oh, lovely, Diane, you have summarized mine very well. Okay, still too early. Yes, thank you. So far so good lah. Okay. That's all I want to know. Okay, great. Keep coming, the feedback, so I will understand. So let's get on and understand this word agile, right? It's really like nobody quite own it in a way, because if you think of the mobile phone, right? In the mobile phone industry, we've got Android, right? And you've got Samsung, you've got all the people who are having their own version of Android. But they're all very much similar to Android, but there might be some variation, right, between Samsung device and maybe it's a O2 or whatever, right? But they're all ultimately Android. Similarly here, I would say, there are many agile methodologies out there, so many of them, so many. In fact, this list is not exhaustive. There's so many. And frankly, if you ask me which is the better one, I would say it depends. But if you ask me which is the most popular one, I would say it's Scrum. Scrum is popular because it's been there for the longest time. It's got a lot of structure to it, and it's quite popular. So if you want to adopt Agile, your choice is many, but most people choose to use Scrum. So that's the kind of Agile methodologies out there, right? There's so many. But the choice of what methodologies to suit you, that is best left to consultants like us who will go into your company, look at your processes, understand your business drivers, evaluate your pain points, understand various aspects to do with your delivery cycle, and then we will accordingly make recommendations, of course. Right. Let's move on to look at a bit of a history, right? Let's understand, although I said that Agile was born in 2001, but it's really in the early 2010s that we saw a lot of traction, a lot of work happening in the space of agility, right? So that's why I'm starting off from there. And you notice that Agile methodologies like Scrum and Kanban became very popular. People start using it. And then later on, a lot of teams started to use it for functional teams, iterative development, and so on. And then it expanded somewhere in mid 2010, possibly around 2015. You notice that other industries, manufacturing, you notice banking, FMGC, other industries started to use agility as well, apply agility. And this is the early stage, right, of adoption and expansion. And then came later part of 2010, something around 2016, 2017, you have got large scale frameworks. Some of you may know SAFe, for large organizations, they use that across the board, and these have become quite popular. And of course, DevOps have come up. So this is what happened, right? And then coming into mid 2020, that is about now, right? So we are looking at this late 2010 into early 2020. A lot of companies started to look at enterprise agility. And just to share with you, I've got one work to do with one bank starting this month. It's an 18-month engagement with the bank. And that's huge, right? That's huge, enterprise agility. You're talking about, in the case of mine, it's 18 months of engagement. That's happening across the board. And a lot of IT departments, a lot of non-IT departments started to use these concepts to share. And the idea of business agility came up. And this is the first part, Agile transformation and business agility. So towards early 2020, you looked at, unfortunately, the pandemic has come in from 2020 to 2022, 21. And in fact, I would say the pandemic accelerated Agile adoption even more, right? If there's one thing we can thank the pandemic for in terms of agility, it's actually made it even more agile. People are more agile now than ever before. And tools have come up, tools like Jira, Azure DevOps, and many other tools have come up to help collaboration work. And companies are becoming more resilient, and Agile is a no-brainer for them, absolutely. And this is the last phase we talk about, remote work and distributed Agile teams. So this is where we are at the moment. Of course, I won't go as far as predicting the future, but this is where we are, right? And the big question, I think, for many of you in this call, probably you're asking me, Sanath, why do I ever want to even have agility in my company? I mean, yeah, I know it's like quite good, it's quite great and all that. But what does it really mean for me? If I'm going to apply this, if I'm going to go back and talk to my bosses that we need to adopt agility, then what will be my selling point? So I've got answers for you. And globally, when they did this research and they found out that people wanted to be agile, whether individuals and organizations, they wanted to be agile because they knew one thing. They knew that they had to increase collaboration. There's just no other way. People were working in silos. There's a lot of lack of engagement. They had to be. And there's somewhat a disconnect between what people are doing and the business direction. And this disconnect is costing organizations a lot of money. And the whole idea about trying to create a good employee experience, right? And it's not just about having a nice pantry, we've got good bonuses, we've got whatever increments over time, this and that. That's also important. But people are driven in today's day and age so much from the environment, right? That the need to feel empowered, the need to own what they do, the need to make decisions timely, the need to basically feel appreciated. And all of these things come a long way to help improve work environment. So here you can see among all the other benefits and reasons, I won't read all of them for you. And you can see there are many good reasons. At least what 2,000 over companies have said from this survey. I didn't put the reference. It was actually a 2022 survey that was conducted that yielded these results. Questions from the floor. I'm just going to stop and hear from the rest of you. Is there anything that you see in the list that is probably not there? What other good reason you think you would probably want to have agility implemented in your company? Is it not in the list? What else? Anyone? Or maybe the other question I would ask is, are these good enough reasons for you to adopt agility at workplace? Okay, so, thank you, Murashima. Accelerate digitalization. That's an extremely good point. In fact, I would go as far as saying that the project that my team and I were involved is on agile transformation, because agile transformation is a prerequisite for digital transformation. You cannot get into digital transformation by installation and getting all your systems and technology to work alone, missing out on the people side of it, right? So agility helps that to come together. Absolutely. So yeah, back to my other question I asked, if I can get a yes or no from you, from all of you, is if you look at this chart, and are these good enough reasons for you, in your opinion, to adopt agility? That's my question. You look at this chart, are these good enough reasons to adopt agility? If it's a yes, please appreciate a thumbs up. If it's a no, thumbs down, it's fine. Or you can even say it on the chat. That's also okay. Okay, I see a lot of yeses coming up. Okay, but maybe someone can even say a no and tell me why. That's also fine. Okay. Someone had a good point. I guess we need to have Raymond. Thank you for that. I guess we need to have culture change and mindset towards agile. Wow, that's a big one, Raymond. That's really a big one. And if you do that well enough, Raymond, you will see what I talked about earlier, right? The learning organization happening. My company's reasons are basically in the top 5. I think when you mean top 5 is the bottom 5, right? Because my chart is a descending one, right? So I suppose what you mean is that, right? Okay, thank you, Afizal. Absolutely. So yeah, it's working. It's relevant for all of us. And I think this is not some random survey that doesn't make sense to us. I think there's some truth to it as well. Okay, lovely. All right, so I'm just going to move on now. So this was just the first part of today's session, right? And we have not gone into the heart of our discussion. Because remember, I told you the whole morning from now until 1 p.m., we're going to talk about this important point on the 12 key takeaways. These 12 key takeaways, in my opinion, is not there in any literature. And I have to disclaim the fact that this has come from my experience in working with many agile projects, companies, in my capacity as a coach, a consultant, and looking at them from both a practitioner point of view and also from the participants or the employee point of view, and also from the leader's point of view. So I'm going to run through 12 key takeaways, and we will be compiling these key takeaways for you as well. So if that's something in your mind, this will be made available to you, the 12 key takeaways. But feel free to take note of anything else you want. A lot of which I'm saying, as you probably know, it's not on the slide because it's not possible to document all of them, right? Okay, so let's start with the first one. Key takeaway number 1. Reduce complexity by increasing visibility. I'm going to take a pause here to let you internalize this. Just a pause for 30 seconds. Well, in principle, it sounds as if, yeah, I know that already. This is important. But frankly, do we do it? If you look at what the kind of information that's presented, the time you take to search for those information, the time you take to get the right people to do the right thing for you, all of this time is wasted. By increasing visibility, we achieve a lot, right? And I think the best lesson we can learn is when we visit airports, right? And if you look at the screen now, this is an arrival board. It tells you, well, this looks like a lot of information, but it's actually quite clear because you are looking for what you want. It's a pull, right? You're pulling information. No doubt information is pushed to you, but you are pulling it. You know what you want. And you get it in no time and you leave. That's what it's for. So really, this is the kind of communication tool. In Agile, we use the word information radiator. That's the word we use in Agile. I like to put it on the chat. Information. Yeah, so if it's a good information radiator, you get it in a snap. It's simple. It's intuitive. It makes a lot of sense. You can make decisions from it. It's that good. Now compare this one. This one. Look at this complicated Gantt chart. It's just so daunting. It's just so, I wonder how you can even make any sense out of it. But people still use it. Gantt charts are very popular in a lot of places, right? But it's certainly not that visible. Not at all, I would say. But compare this to a typical tool that we apply in Agile. This is the Kanban board, as it's called. It's really quite simple, right? You're looking at what's happening, who's doing what, and the cards get moved. There's a lot of aesthetic feel. It's lovely, right? It's lovely. So that's what it is. So you get it, right? You want communication tools, platforms, methods, and procedures to be seamless enough that facilitates this. That's exactly what we're talking about. Increasing visibility. So I'm going to stop at the end of every takeaway. I'm going to quickly ask you if this makes sense, or is it something that we've taken for granted. I know it's something so simple, but these things are taken for granted, really. Any input from the floor? Anyone can relate to this sort of challenges that you see happening in your workplace, right? Is it something that's like, if I can ask Diane, do you see these sort of challenges, not just in your company, but it can be anywhere else? Feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts. That's fine. when you say minimal, are you talking about the choice of the tools itself, or the way in which the communication is done? There's two things, right? Sometimes it's the tool, sometimes the way it's communicated. Or is it both? Okay, in your case, it's a choice of tools. Okay, fine. And you know what's the worst part? There's just so many of them. That's also another problem, right? You either have one or two good tools and use them consistently than having many tools, even if they are good. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to move on to any other questions, any other input from anyone. Let's get on to the next key takeaway. Individual empowerment versus team empowerment. Now, a lot of HR policies traditionally, I know we have a few HR managers on the call, you may disagree with me as well, or agree with me, that the policies are very much geared towards the individual side of empowerment. And even if we look at the appraisal system and the way we award people their increments, have always been skewed towards individual empowerment. But here I'm saying team performance, and for that to happen, the team empowerment is to be given greater emphasis compared to individual performance. Now, I want to ask this question. Why is team empowerment, if you can make out the reason, why is it given a bigger emphasis? Why is that so? Okay, so Wendy, you've got a nice input there. I gather what you're saying is that you are open to suggestions and seeing how these things can be adopted, right, in your company. Raymond, lovely, you've done Kanban. Okay, that's nice. Kanban is, by the way, one of Agile methods. It's the easiest and the best method to visualize the activity. Lovely. Kanban is great. And Afizal, you answered the question, right? Why is there a bigger emphasis towards team agility? Because people work in teams, and that's pretty obvious, right? And it makes a lot of sense if they work better as a team. And well, Wendy, obviously we can't do everything alone as much as we try to do. But the other problem is this, right? When there's a lot of individualism and it's always about me doing my work, and if I'm not around, I'm not available, then work gets disrupted, right? And if there's a team ownership involved, then you don't see that happening as much. Work as a team can achieve more results than in silos. That's right. I'm glad all of you are giving your viewpoints. Very good. EFNA, there's a lot of collaboration in teams. Brilliant. And you want that, right? And that's where a lot of energy comes out, isn't it? And this collaboration, you feel the energy. Afizal, I think both team and individual empowerment should be focused. That's an extremely good point, because I have personally spoken to HR managers. In fact, I delivered a keynote once to an HR conference, and this was the discussion about, right? What sort of weightage do you give for the individual side? Because you always want to also acknowledge that side of things. But at the same time, you also want to understand the ability of this person to connect, collaborate, the team's output, because cohesively, they own that outcome, right? So there must be a team outcome, and they must be empowered to do what they need to do. But at the same time, you've got the individual brilliance as well, and that cannot be negated also. So very good point, Afizal. Absolutely a good point. All right. So thank you. I thought that was very good insight from all of you. Crystal, yes, individuals have different strengths, so work as team, obviously, so we leverage on each other's strength. We could assign different work that requires different skill and strength to the right person to achieve the goal or objective. Brilliant. Yeah, that's really what it is, right? And you know what, Crystal? If the team is truly empowered, the boss do not have to tell them, hey, you are good at this, huh? You do this. You're not good at this, you do that. The team themselves will organize it. So in fact, one of the things that you will learn if you get into an actual training is that we talk about the ability of the team to be self-directed, right? But before you can be self-directed, they must self-organize themselves first. And there are certain things we need to do to be able to self-organize ourselves and then be able to self-direct. That's a nice idea, right? So absolutely, good point, Crystal. Thank you. So keep the comments going, because I think that's really what I wanted out of the session today, to get us into that mode of discussion and thinking. Great. So I'll just do one more key takeaway and then we can take a break, right? I'm going to go to key takeaway number 3. Unless there are any further questions or input. Okay, I see there are none. The third one is talking about the idea of doing it first versus do it right the first time, right? And it's interesting because we hear this word a lot of times, right? Do it right the first time. But is it even possible to do it right the first time? And let's think about it, right? Just to pause, and I just want all of you to just read this. I'm just going to pause for. So let me share something with you. I'm just going to stop presenting and share my whiteboard. So yes, Raymond, you got that right on the chat. The preferred approach is doing it first. And if there's a better way of putting it, I like the Nike slogan that says, just do it. If that's an easier way of putting it. Let me share something now with you. Share my, okay, if you can actually see my whiteboard. Can I check if you can see my whiteboard right now? Now, I'm just going to show you. I mean, the idea is this, right? You've got a large chunk of work that you want to get done. You start here, you end here. Now, this might take, say, for example, 3 months. And if I'm going to get or spend my time planning for this, doing it right the first time, and it's going to take so long, the planning is going to take so long, and by the time I plan, weeks would have passed. So the idea is now breaking up this into manageable parts, right? So probably I could say, I don't know, this could be about 3 weeks or so. You know, I got my maths right. Okay, this hopefully ends up 2 months plus at the moment. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Yeah, that's about 3 months, maybe short of a week. So you're actually breaking up these large chunks into smaller parts, right? And that's agility, right? You are trying to get something out sooner by getting it done and seeing the outcome, manageable parts, planning small, building momentum as you progress, because this outcome will feed into the next outcome, right? And that's really what agility is all about, in a way, putting it in a nutshell. So the advantage of doing it is manifold. Number one, because I'm breaking out into small outcomes, my output and my risk is smaller. And because it's smaller, it correlates to lesser stress, lesser budget. And if the worst happens, rejection, you're only looking at this much of time lost, right? As opposed to planning the big whole thing at one go. So that is the idea of doing it first as opposed to doing it right the first time, because by meticulously planning and spending so much time planning, you take just so much time. So a question from Raymond on the chat. Doing it first is the way moving forward means the team might keep on, if I can sort of understand what he's saying, keep on hitting on the wall because they keep facing the same issues, right? So the thing is this, right? I mean, usually when you take a smaller chunk of work and try to get that working, you will have an idea of what the bigger issue is. But if you waste so much time planning excessively to do the whole thing, then you'll never get an idea because you're not even started, right? So that is the point here. And I agree with Shakira, and it really depends on a case-to-case basis as well. Yes, I'm hearing you out. Well, I would rather do it right the first time so you can avoid facing unnecessary work and tasks. However, do it first can apply if you need to stick to the retrospective. So I see where you're coming from, and I think there's no magic formula. For example, if you are in a construction industry, and some of you are in the oil and gas industry, I've noticed from your sharing earlier on, you will find that meticulous planning is mandated by law, right? You need to have that planning ahead of time because you cannot otherwise come up with a shoddy construction because of poor planning. No way. But what I'm trying to say is that in most cases where you're getting a lot of engagement input that's coming across, it's better to have them validated. Yeah, so I agree with you, Wendy. For development project, when I say development, I suppose you mean construction, right? And R&D projects obviously is great at doing it like that. And a lot of development projects like IT development projects and so on, you can. And I've got one experience, talking to the directors of JKR, most of us here we know who JKR is, right? The Public Works Department. And while JKR, you would argue, they are constructing bridges, schools, and all, they have to be very regimented. Their planning has to be that perfect. But they have realized, and after I've done that session with them like this one day, that they can engage their stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, the public, the agencies, in a better way if they had adopted agility. And because they're not agile in the earlier phase, pre-construction phase, they found that a lot of what could have gathered early on did not get into the development because of that poor engagement. Right? Do you see what I mean? Yep, we're getting some very good points here. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. With a work background structure, you have the flexibility. Yes, that's true. And yeah, I got your point, Wendy. So you see my point. So there's never a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, surely. But yes, it really depends on the industry and what phase of it. So in JKR, the example I gave was the pre-construction phase that agility was applied. Let's continue from where we left off. We were talking about key takeaway 3, and that's the difference between doing it first versus doing it right the first time. Now, I think the clarification, as some of you have rightfully said, is not that we are doing it haphazardly. It's not to say that we are not going to do it right the first time, but the focus is to do it first. And why is that an important distinction? Because by excessively planning and spending so much resources, expending our time and energy, doing it so thoroughly when work has actually not started, is really counterproductive, if you ask me, in most cases. So that is just to add on that note for key takeaway 3. Thank you for that lovely feedback. And I think one comment I missed out was from Wendy in relation to your comments with Apple. Yeah, Apple first products were never perfect, and they got themselves iterated along the way, and the rest is history, right? In system development, POV, proof of concept, POV, what does that V sound for? Do it first will create close engagement with users during development. That's right. And this will accelerate the adoption process. Brilliant. That's a very good point, Nurishavan. Yeah, absolutely. Point of view. Great. So I think we're in sync here. We've all understood why that intention of, focusing on doing something first. And let that be in a small chunk as opposed to taking a lot of work that might be too much of our resources and time consumed as a result. All right, so let's move on, and we're looking at the next one, key takeaway 4. And it's actually quite connected to the earlier one. It's the idea of failing fast, right? I'm just going to pause for a moment to have you read that, just 20 seconds. So as you would have guessed, failing fast is connected to doing it first, right? And because you're doing it in small chunks, the culture of experimentation, you explore ideas and you see the outcomes faster. And here's one way to look at it. If I'm going to fail, not in the negative sense, but if I'm going to fail, and if I know it next month, well, that's a long wait. Isn't it better if I knew it now or this week that I'm going to fail or I have failed than waiting for 1 month? Again, the whole discussion of time, resources, and energy expended. So much time spent is gone all wasted, right? So now the idea of failing fast is I can short track the whole process much faster, knowing my outcome sooner. Well, it doesn't really have to be failing, right? Even though the word is failing fast, you can also succeed fast, actually, but they call it failing fast. You get what I mean, right? And another way of looking at it is this particular chart popularized by this gentleman, Deming. We call it the Deming cycle. And Deming became very popular, actually, in the 1940s. The Japanese love him because after the Second World War, he got seconded to Japan and he literally helped build Japan the way you see today because of their quality improvement that was first brought in by Deming. And one of the things that Deming said was this, right? And if some of you remember, he said, plan, do, check, act. But I added the word little there. That's my addition. The black font, as you can see, plan a little, do a little, and check, act. So in small chunks, you can now basically organize your whole development process in that way, right? In Scrum, we call that sprint. Sprint is a time frame that is small enough that you can see meaningful outcomes and have it demonstrated to your stakeholders. So that's the kind of idea we're talking about. Is that a concept that rings a bell for most of you? Anyone needs a bit of input? So the idea of failing fast is that I get to do something, to experiment on something, and quickly validate my outcomes, whether I'm heading in the right direction or not. And the outcome will tell me what I should do next. And if I can have these short cycles, many, many short cycles, then I know I'm heading in the direction that I should be. If I'm not, then I can tweak my directions because I know I'm not succeeding. Okay, so that's the idea of failing fast, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next key takeaway. Okay, the famous one, right? Customer is always right. Okay, so again, I'm going to pause for 10 seconds. If you can read this. So, I mean, let's put it this way. I'm not just saying, I mean, the way people coin this term, customer is always right, is probably a bit different from what we practice in agility, right? And here we're talking about customer centricity. That means being very aligned with the customer, not as in right in the right sense. I mean, customers can also make mistakes, of course, but we are very aligned with them. And this alignment is so important because the closer we are aligned with customers, then the chances are that our deliveries are going to be accepted by them. And we don't waste as much energy, time, and effort because what we're doing has been confirmed and validated by them anyway. And I think we know a lot of examples. And one example that we can always think about is Amazon, right? Amazon just, in fact, they use this word delight customers. They just love to delight customers. And the other one that is closer to home is Starbucks, right? We know, we have visited Starbucks, they just love to delight their customers. And that's really what it is. But here is where I want you to share your thoughts. A lot of people do not like the statement, customer is always right, because of one thing, right? What is it that we don't like? I don't think anybody can say they like it. Maybe. There's one thing that we don't like about this statement. And that starts with the letter C. C. C for China. Can someone guess what that is? The question is, what is it that we do not like about this idea of customer is always right? And there's one word that begins with the letter C. C. Yeah, I'll give you a better tip, huh? Did someone guess? Yeah, I'll just give you 2 letters now. CH. I'm sure you can guess now. It's a lot to do with customer coming back to you asking for something. I want this. Yes, Raymond got that right. It's change, right? I mean, it's nice to hear this word, customers right, but when they come back to you and say, can I have this done differently? Can you do this for me? This is not what I wanted. I want something else. This is change, right? And change is always not too pleasant. And it means a lot of rework on our part. Now, again, the point is this. Whether you like it or not, customers will still come back to you to ask for change because they are your paymasters. They pay you. So my point of view is that why not embrace change? Since it's happening after all, just embrace it. But here's what I have to say. If you align with your stakeholders well enough, the rate of change will reduce as the project progresses. I repeat, if you align with your customers well enough, the rate of change will reduce as the project progresses. Meaning, I'm not saying there will not be change, but the rate will reduce. And that is what we're hoping for, right? As the project progresses, the greater alignment the customer wants and what you want, it's all aligned, and you're moving in that mode. That's what we're talking about. The question from Raymond. To have the best project scope and ensure minimal changes. Well, that's a nice way of looking at it and thinking of it, Raymond. But really, can we really have the best project scope? That's a big question mark, right? As much as we try to ascertain what the customer wants, they themselves, in many cases, don't even know what they want. And the only way for us to align with what they want is to have what I said earlier, right? The idea of do it first and failing fast. And by doing that, you have the demonstration to the customer. They'll tell you, you know what, Raymond, we forgot this. I'm so sorry. What are you going to tell them? Why didn't you tell me earlier? They will tell you, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't see it coming. So that's the idea, right? To have that scope. I mean, yeah, you're right. We would have at least 75% or 80% of the scope determined before. But there's always going to be a small variance of scope that may have some adjustments because of the visibility was not there in the beginning. Does that make sense, Raymond? Afizal? Okay. Well, I kind of like you're saying, the retail side of things, it tends to go in the wrong way. Customer tends to think they know what's best for them. Then we try to provide the best solution. So that's a very valid point, and that is why I said the whole idea of stakeholder engagement is a subject in itself. In Agile, we have loads of different ways to do that. Unfortunately, because of time, I'm not able to get into the specifics of how we do it. Right. So today I'm just sharing with you some thought processes, but you're absolutely right, Afizal. If it's not done in the right way, at times it can be counterproductive. So yeah, you are seconded by Nurashima as well. And thanks, Raymond, for that input. All right, but in principle, I think we understand what it is. But yes, there's always going to be the challenge of customers not knowing what they think they should be knowing, and the idea of we know better, and they think we don't know what we should be knowing. So this is tussle, right? The tussle that goes on all the time. Any other input from anyone before we move on to the next one? Okay, so let's move on to key takeaway number 6. The question is, are you done? Okay, this is a nice one. Any seconds, if you can read that. Okay, so let me put it this way. Have you had the scenario? Let me just simulate something here, right? Let's say I am Raymond's boss, for the lack of examples. So I come one day to Raymond and said, Raymond, how's your progress? And Raymond tells me, all good, boss. All okay. No problem. Right? This is a very typical answer we get, right? Now, in fact, as you would have guessed, the word okay is one of the world's misused words. And it turns out that what Raymond said was okay is that he is doing his work and he has no problems. It doesn't mean he has finished. It doesn't mean he has finished. But here I'm a boss thinking, oh, maybe he's almost done and he's going to wrap up. Then I comes back to tell, hey, Raymond, I thought you said okay. Oh, no, what I meant was I have no problems. Ah. Now the boss thinks, hey, how come? Earlier you said, okay, I thought all finished. So here is where there is always going to be a difference in viewpoint. In Agile, we ask this question, what is your definition of done? So let me type it on the chat. DOD, we call it. Definition of done. DOD. So if there is no common understanding of what is to be considered as done, there will be a big problem between Raymond and his boss. But now let's say, Raymond has this checklist. Okay, this is the definition of done. He's got all that cleared out. He knows that by finishing this particular requirement, it means that I have finished all of that. I've updated my documentation, I've done this, I've done that, I've communicated to my stakeholder, I've done this and that. So next time around, when Raymond's boss asking the question, Raymond, are you done? No, I've not done because we have 2 more checklists not finished. Oh, okay, that's clear because we know what the status is, because either you're done or you're not done. If you're not done, you should be able to say what's left. And if you're done, it means you have cleared the checklist. right? So this definition of done is a very, very important criteria, and that may differ from project to project, right? Because you have different clients that might even differ from requirements to requirements. So for example, you're preparing a proposal, that definition of done could be different, right? Maybe you need to get your endorsement from your finance as far as the cost is concerned, and you've got to get your immediate line manager to confirm that you've added all the required line items. But if you're doing, say, software development, the definition of done could be different, because if you're doing a function like login, then that login must have been tested first before it's done, as in done, right? Because, you know, if it just works on your screen and you're so excited, but it's not tested, that's not done. So this is what I mean as the definition of done. Now I'm just checking, is this an idea that is workable in your various settings? This is a good takeaway. Yeah, this is something that you can do it very easily. There's absolutely no cost. All you need to do is have that common understanding in the team. What is your quality standard? Some people call it quality standard, right? If you say you're done, you must have all these things. That's our quality standard. Does that make sense? Can I check if you're okay with this idea? If you can, just put a thumbs up or okay on the chat, so I know I'm good to proceed. Okay, good. So Afizal, you've got checklist, yeah. So the important thing is about the checklist is that, Afizal, you might want to match the checklist with the kind of work that's involved, right? Because sometimes checklists become so generic that it's not applicable actually in most cases for across the board. So in tools like Jira and all the other tools, you can actually match them or map them to the requirements, right? Because the idea is this: if you do not know what is that you need to do in order to be complete, then your work will never be complete, because you don't even know what is it that you must do to be complete. So that in itself, in coming up with the checklist itself, is a proof that we have understood our work so well, right? So this is highly encouraged for teams to do. And in the training sessions, we talk about this in a bit more detail for sure. Okay, good. Thanks for that input. Now we go to key takeaway 7. Yeah, remember we have 12 takeaways, so we are just crossed halfway. The age-old saying, seeing is believing, right? So what is it here? What does it mean? Okay, we've got someone who's just joined us, I think. You can just mute yourself. That'll be great. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, yeah, all right, it's good now. Okay, so what is seeing is believing? You know what it says here. Outcomes are demonstrated to stakeholders frequently, typically 2 to 3 weeks to validate progress and confirm it. So I'm just going to simulate something here on the whiteboard for you to give you an idea how that works. Okay, so if you can see my screen, just checking if you can see my screen, and just check on the chat. Okay, that's great. All right, so I'm just going to erase this first. Okay, so the question of seeing is believing, right? I'm going to have, yeah, I've got a backlog here. I'm just using a term now that some of you may not be or hearing it for the first time. So this is a backlog. What is a backlog? Backlog is basically nothing but all your pending work. Right? I've got a backlog here, right? And there's so much of work. Maybe this work, all of it can go on for, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, maybe. There's so much of work here. Basically all the work I need to do in a project, it's in the backlog. Let's assume that, okay? And this backlog is prioritized, meaning what's on the top of the backlog will be the most important features and the most important work, and what is bottom would be less important and less urgent. So I'm going to decide, okay, let's say I'm going to do this first this is going to be done in my first sprint. Now, another jargon I'm introducing, sprint is basically a cycle of time. So you've got 2 weeks, let's say. So in 2 weeks, I'm going to get this much work done. And well, I can do it, but how do I know that that is what the customer wants? So what I will do is at the end of 2 weeks, I will get the customer present and I will do a demo to the customer. Now, this customer is going to tell me whether he likes the work or he doesn't like the work. If he likes the work, it means I can confirm that I have done and there is progress. If the customer does not like the work, unhappy, not happy, it means I need to know what is it that I didn't do well. And this feedback gives me the insight that I need to be a bit more aligned with the customer. So this is what we're talking about here when we say seeing is believing. This frequent demonstration. So what will happen now after the first sprint? I've got the feedback, right? Then I'll do the second sprint. So I will take input from the customer earlier, whatever feedback they gave me, and I will do sprint 2. And once again, I will get the customer involved for feedback, right? The customer provides feedback. This feedback will go back to the next sprint. And once again, I will have the third sprint. And another feedback round. So you can imagine this cycle will continue until the project is over. So this repeated demonstration of progress to the customer is one way to satisfy the customer, right? Because the customer is only going to be happy if he or she observes visibly progress that is being made. Of course, in some industries, there is really no visible update because the nature of the industry is that. But in most cases, it is possible that you get this alignment. Now, let's take another type of project which are probably a bit more not so normal. Say we're preparing a proposal, and this is a huge proposal. The proposal itself takes 2 months, right? So every 2 weeks, say for example, if my cycle is 2 weeks, so every week maybe, you can seek alignment between your stakeholders that you're doing a proposal correctly. And that input is for you to correct it, as opposed to waiting for 1 month and then showing work, by which time the change would have been so much that you find yourself, if I had known this earlier, would that be nice? So that's the idea, right? Question on this? Is there any a point that you want to ask? Okay, Raymond, is there a point that you see this idea of seeing is believing, getting your stakeholders in as frequent as you can, giving them that opportunity to give you feedback? Is it possible for you? What about Jess, Fu, and Pan? What are your thoughts? Questions from anyone? Murashima, if you can, just want to check with you because you mentioned something earlier as well about agreeing with Afizal on the retail side of things and the challenge you face in trying to seek alignment with your stakeholders. Could something be done differently? I think that was the point from Afizal, right? You said you had this challenge with stakeholders and that you had this issue, right? Maybe if you could, Afizal, unmute yourself and share your pain that you have gone through. So while Afizal is sharing, or I hope he's going to speak something, I can run through some of the other comments. Afizal is in the meeting. All right, no worries, Afizal. Diane, you reminds me of the pandemic where I presume MKN is Kesihatan, right? Had to come up with SOPs to handle country's health. Okay. Yep. Currently, I have a project, Raymond, and the project has been updated on each sprint, and the results had been published to the stakeholders. Okay, that's great. So you're doing this already, right? Raymond, and nice to see that. Now, what has been the benefit of doing it? Do you see that there's a way that can be done better, Raymond? Or do you still have customers, despite doing the demo, not liking your outcome every single time? Does that happen? That'd be nice to know from you. Raymond is already doing sprint, so he knows what I'm talking about. Okay, thank you for your feedback. So while waiting for Raymond, if you want to unmute yourself and just share your thoughts, that might be a bit faster. Afizal is back in his comment. Development BI for top management, which I believe that is the best based on data for turbulent form. Okay, so you're talking about getting inputs from the leadership, right? But those are very important stakeholders as well. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm still waiting for Raymond to share his thoughts, but while that happens, let's get on with the next one. Okay, so we're moving to, so before I move on to takeaway 8, I would just like to share with you, and this is interesting because I've talked about the idea of sprint and backlog, and some of you must be wondering all these things, what are these things on? So later when I do the demonstration after lunch, you will see this idea of what is this backlog and how do we create sprints out of that backlog. So hang on there. For those of you who feel that it's getting a bit technical, I will be doing that demonstration after lunch. So Raymond has another point to say. Yes, customers still complain, but minimal level. Okay, that's good. Naturally, we can't accommodate all requests. Best to put into the next sprint or the next request. Okay, that's good. And I like what you said. It's minimal, which means by addressing this request on a continual basis, you are able to proactively address customer demands, right? Obviously, we can't fulfill everything, but we are proactive enough to hear them out. There's a channel for them to communicate with us, and there's a way for us to also address their pain points. Good. Thank you, Raymond. It was a good one. Okay, I'm going to go on to key key takeaway 8. Now, this is a tough one. Just wanted all of you to read that first before I explain. Okay, in order to explain this idea, and I'm not sure how many of you in this call are familiar with the idea of points or story points. Raymond, do you do that in your project or in your company? Is that a concept that is familiar? I'm just asking everybody else as well. Is this idea of story points a concept that you have heard before? I'm expecting most of you to say no, but for those of you who have used it, that'd be nice for you to indicate on the chat. Yeah, so yeah, most of you are saying it is the first time. So let me share with you, why is it that, okay, Raymond, you use it, that's nice. Story points from key stakeholders, all right, that's good. First time, most of you are saying first time, all right, okay, good. Let me just give you some idea. I'm afraid I will not be able to go into the depth of it because estimation of effort in itself is a module in a full-fledged training course. But let me give you a bit of insight as to what we're talking here. Okay, let me give you a bit of simulation now, right? So let's say, Raymond, I'm using your name again. So now, you see, I come to Raymond and say, okay, Raymond, I would like you to do this work, and I think you should be done in 1 day. So I am coming to Raymond. I'm not doing the work. I'm presumably the manager. And I come to Raymond and say, I think you should do this in 1 day. Now, two things happen now. Number one, I think Raymond should finish in 1 day. So I'm using time, right? Time as a measurement. Now, number one, it's what I think. Either Raymond could finish it sooner, or either it's not enough. Raymond needs more than 1 day. That's one problem. Number two, let's say, even if it's 1 day, and now I'm aware that, okay, I need to finish 1 day. If I finished it earlier, oh, great. Actually, it only 2 hours, I don't need 1 day. Sanath doesn't know. It's okay. I just take 2 hours and I do other things the remaining time. Or if I know it's 2 hours, oh, I got the whole day. Let me just 1/2 day do something else and I don't bother with this work. I relax a bit or something. And I spend the last few hours of the day to finish it. We all like to procrastinate, right? So that could also happen. So this is one of the problems, actually. In fact, there are many other issues which I unfortunately cannot go into because of time. When you start associating work with time, you will have these issues. Now, to flip it aside, if we would now compute it in effort, the effort now comes from Raymond, not from me. So the team now decides they want to do X amount of work. And this is connected by points. And if I can then say that we're going to do 20 points of work, and that 20 points of work, we will decide how long it takes. But we will finish 20 points of work. Now, typically in Agile teams, they decide this ahead of time, right? And if you have a sprint, the team decides how much work. Now, let me just give you a simulation again using my white chart. I want to go through this idea with you a bit more. This can be potentially a little bit of a confusing topic, I admit, but I'm just going to give you a bit of insight. That's it. Okay, if you can see my screen now. Right. So here, okay, if you can see my screen, I've got a backlog. What is a backlog again? List of pending work, right? So I've got all the work here to be done. Now, I estimate effort. So this takes 5 points, this is 7 points, this is 2 points, this is 3 points, whatever. And the total, let's say, comes to 100. Okay. So if I decide in one sprint, this is one sprint, right? I'm going to do 5 and 7. So that is 12 points worth of work in one sprint. So I'm going to do 12 items, 12 work. So 12 over 100. So my progress for sprint 1 is 12%. You see that? Because of assigning points for each work item, I can now compute my effort, how much I can finish in one sprint. So in this sprint, I can finish 12 points. Of course, in the next sprint, okay, if I can finish 12 points in one sprint, maybe I should be taking more work because all of this is only 5 points. Plus another 2 is 7 points. Maybe I can take another sprint, another piece of work. So all of this becomes sprint 2, which I finish in this case, 5, 7, 7 plus 3, 12 points again. So cumulatively, my progress is 12 plus 12 is 24 over 100. My progress is now 24%. Now, all of this possible is because I've used not time, right? I've used points. Now, of course, you may have a question, Sanath, how do you determine what is 5, what is 2, what is 3, what is 4? Now, all of that, of course, there are techniques that we can use. And in the full-fledged training, we will learn all these things, how to get these idea of story points applied in real life environment. Okay, so I'm just giving you a glimpse of what that is. Okay. So that's a question, I think, question, Raymond, you had. We will have story points, then from story, we will then come up with man hours. So yes, that's possible. So from story points, you can then determine how much time you need. So like in my early example, right? I said I did 12 points in one sprint. If your one sprint is 2 weeks, then you can work backwards and compute the man hours. That's possible, right? But you don't start with time. You start with effort and story points. And the question from Shakira, how do you define the points in each backlog? So yeah, that's the point that I wanted to mention to you. That discussion itself is quite elaborate, Shakira. I wish I had the time to go through that with you right now. But all we just need to understand is that if we do compute these points effectively, it provides the basis to understand effort. Effort, right? Effort is basically a combination of your abilities plus your number of people. If the effort is higher, of course, you need a higher skill level, you need more people. So you will know in the team whether something is 5 or something is 2, but there are techniques to do that. Okay, so my apologies that we will not be able to go through that now, given the time we have, but that's the idea. Do you get the idea, Shakira, what we're talking about?
Basically, I just want to understand
Okay.
in terms of the definition of the points to each of the backlogs based on your whiteboard earlier. How am I supposed to know that these particular backlogs, for example, in terms of technicality, what would be the points that reflect to that? For example, in terms of deployment, programming, what are the points? In terms of documentation, what are the points? So I understand that we don't really have much time, but is there any references or I can self-study that you can share with us?
Sure. What I can do is I will share some thought process with you during lunchtime, some links that will point you towards agile estimation. So if you are going to look out for resources in Google, you can always type this word agile estimation using story points. I'm just typing it on the chat. so that it's easy for you to search for the right resources. Yeah. Now, just to quickly answer that point that you asked me, I know we don't have the time, but I still want to give you some idea. It goes by the idea of benchmark and relative size, because you see, for example, I'll give you an example since you mentioned about programming, right? So let's say login. Okay, the team assigns 3 points for login, and they know that to do this login feature, I need to do this, 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 and this. So they more or less know the effort involved, and they know their team, they have done before, and they have the experience, so they can reasonably say, they might say that, okay, we take 3 points. Example. Okay. Now we take another function, generate report. Wow, the team feels that this is a lot more work than login. So if it's a lot more work, then they decide among themselves. Remember, it's all team empowered. The team decides, right? In Agile, we talk about team. The team decides that, oh, this is a lot more work, maybe 5 times more effort than login. And surely we may not have that much expertise. And there's a lot of learning involved, a lot of experimentation involved. So they might say that this is 15 points. So there's no right or wrong as to what should be the right amount, but the team will use the basis of previous points to relatively estimate what other work points should be. So I'm so sorry, it's a bit of a long-winded explanation for you, but that's in a nutshell. Hope it makes sense. You're welcome. All right. So if that's this is usually a challenging topic area because we've not gone into the depth. So I do appreciate that you feel a little bit new or something they have not seen before. This is quite common. Okay, let's get on with key takeaway 9 now. That's interesting. The team strength is based on 3 C's: capacity, capability, and camaraderie. So what does that mean? Have a read first. 20 seconds. Oops, you can't see my screen. So sorry. Okay, let me. I didn't share it right. Okay, can you see my screen now? Thanks for that feedback. Okay, thank you, Raymond, for that feedback. So we are in, let me repeat myself, we are in key takeaway 9. We are talking about the 3 C's, right? Capacity, capability, and camaraderie. Okay, so what is capacity? Capacity is straightforward, right? The number of people you have, the resources you have. What is capability? It's the skill and talent of your people, right? If they're skillful and they're talented, naturally they have higher capability. Now, it's always the case, sometimes we have enough resource, but they're not capable, meaning they have not done it before. They're all very new. They are inexperienced. But sometimes you have very experienced people, yet you don't have many of them. And that's also a problem, right? Because you have talent, but not enough of them to go around. So that also affects your team strength. But what is also very interesting is the idea of what I just said earlier, camaraderie, because sometimes, what is that, by the way? It's just, if you ask me in Malay, it's just semangat, the team semangat, level of motivation, right? And you sometimes find that you have lack of capacity, you have lack of capability, but because they're so energized, they still get work done, right? That's why that's so important. It's got that C coming in, the third C, right? Has this been your experience? Right, you're under-resourced, you still got it done because you had good team spirit. You had good colleagues that cooperated with you and got it done still. Has that been an experience for you? I hear it all the time, I know for one instance that a friend of mine, he's got the smallest department in the company. But anything that needs to be done, they get it done. And they get it done really well. And people always wonder because you're so understaffed, but how could you do it? It's just that they were so united, there was so much of cohesiveness, and that's so very important, right? We want to achieve agility. Shakira, in that project that you were in, if you could just help me explain that thought process. Do you foresee that this is something that it's important for you? This idea of the 3 C's, that's always juggling, between their level of motivation, their team strength, their capacity. Is
Uh,
this
yes, it is. Is very important because in the company that I work for, we face a lot of restructuring. Sadly to
Mhm,
say, is every quarterly.
mhm,
So we do have projects coming in. However, when this restructuring happen, we do not know where our capability is. We do
mhm,
not know the capacity, in the
mhm.
sense of where is our work direction is, who to report to now, where is the company roadmap and whatnot. So basically, the 3 Cs is very important to be deployed for myself, personally, professionally, as well as for my team.
Definitely. What do you do, by the way, Shakira, just for me to understand the context of your point?
Uh, I'm dealing with cloud strategies. I'm the solution
Okay,
architect,
okay,
providing the solution as well as also do all the project management when the project kicks in.
absolutely. So yeah, brilliant. So you said it all too well, actually. So the point is, when there's so much of uncertainty, what do, right? You just have your team and you've just got the direction, just move on. And it's so much of a blessing to have that team that you've just said you have. Congrats to you there. Diane, great asset to the team, and it takes time and intentionality to build. Definitely, it takes time. It just doesn't happen, right? And this is why I said earlier, agility at workplace takes time to build and takes time to achieve. It's the whole culture that has to permeate across. Absolutely. Good point. Okay, so good. Let's get on with the next takeaway. Key takeaway number 10. Productivity is not necessarily working harder. Nice, huh? Some people might tell you otherwise, but let me just pause for a while, have a read at this. 10 seconds. All right. So if someone comes and tells you, comes and tells me, Sanath, you know, um, they work 10 hours today to finish what they need to finish. And well, yes, in principle, they worked hard. But then you ask this question, did they do what they were supposed to be doing? That's the first thing, right? Well, if they answer yes, that's what they were doing. Then the other question can arise, what was the expected outcome against what was the outcome? So I repeat, what was the expected outcome, supposedly, and what was the outcome? Surely, if there is a difference in the two, then there is an aspect of quality, right? So, surely in Agile, we have this idea called velocity. And again, I'm not sure whether some of you may have heard of this word. And I suppose those of you doing cloud solution IT work, development work may have heard of this countless of times. I'm just going to key in that on the chat. So teams consistently measure velocity, how well they're performing, but you cannot measure work that is seemingly complete but rejected in quality. I repeat, if a work has been completed and you say it's 12 points, I finished 12 points, but finishing 12 points would mean that the points were accepted, right? If there was a rejection of those points, then the question arises is it done? Have you achieved the desired velocity? Okay, so this is the big question, right? And an age-old debate between many line managers and their employees. Well, in the full-fledged training, we get into this topic a lot. We do a lot of simulation. We compute velocity from sprint to sprint, and we understand why velocity is decreasing, and we hope to increase velocity in the next round. But the idea is to stabilize your velocity. I'm sorry if I'm throwing a lot of jargons out here, but essentially it exactly means what I've just said. Velocity is basically the outcome that we're tracking, not hours worked. Because if we move away from hours, then we are outcome driven, right? And if we are outcome driven, we are based on outcome. And our points are measured against outcome, right? That's what we're saying. Any questions here? Any ideas? Any thought process or confusion? If it's not, can I just check if it's okay for you to put an okay? All right, if it's not okay, feel free to say the same. So these are very high level concepts, right? So in actual fact, when we do get into projects and this gets translated into what we do, but suffice for today, if you understand and you embrace these takeaways, you are understanding agility. That's what I want from today, right? That's the outcome for us. Okay, good. The rest of you who are in the call probably multitasking. That's fine. Okay, fine. Let's get on. Let's look at key takeaway 11. I like this. Doing less, achieving more. Have a read at this. 15 seconds. What it really means is just this, right? I should be doing what I am supposed to be doing and less of what I am not supposed to be doing. Repeat. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and less what I'm not supposed to be doing. Well, in principle, this seems very easy. As an idea, it's quite easy. But in actual fact, I'll share with you my experience as an enterprise coach. When I get down and understand from the policy point of view, from the culture point of view, from the processes point of view, this is not that easy. Can someone share why is it the case? Why is it not so easy? Why is this idea nice, but not so easy to implement? Any reason why? Just checking with Afizal, if you are here, do you want to share your thought process? How about Nurul and Miles Chang? Any ideas from yourself? As a concept, is easy, right? I just have to eliminate things I do not want to do and not important, and it's wasting my time so I can be more efficient. But it's not so easy, right? So, like for example, Shakira, just checking on you again, what you do as a cloud solution architect, and you definitely know what you must do for compliant purposes. But if you were to look at what's currently happening on the ground, do you think that there are room for improvement to make your team more efficient?
Um, I think from this perspective, I divided into as a team leader perspective, and another one
Mm-hmm.
is as the management perspective. On the team leader perspective, that would be myself. Due to what happening on the ground right now, of course, we are human being. Things will be, we will face like demotivation kind of thing. There's no proper direction, so it will bring the work mood down. So as a
Mm-hmm.
team leader, normally what I do is that I will have like I will spend time with them like during the team meeting. I will
Mm-hmm.
I will get them to um share with me what are the challenges that they've been facing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is during the work time. But after the work time, I will bring them out
Mm-hmm.
for dinner
Mm-hmm.
or for a teh tarik session, just to make sure that they feel good about themselves and nothing to be worried, because we are a team, so we face this
Mm.
together. But as from management perspective, I believe the management need to have a better clarity in terms
Okay.
of sharing with us, be transparent with us,
Mm.
because we are not school freshly graduate people. We are basically um, adults. We work
Yeah.
before. We are experienced human being. That's why the company hire us from the first for the first time.
Yep.
So be
Yep.
transparent
Correct.
with us. What are the roadmap and whatnot, and from there
Mm.
we know how to achieve more. We know how to plan more. We know how
Yeah.
to strategize better as a team.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
that is what I've been doing right now. I mean, it's a kind of pain in the ass. Pardon my language,
Mm.
but
Sure. Sure.
this is the best that I could think of. Unless if you have any other advice that you can share, it will be much appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with Raymond. How nice your boss like you, huh? Tare session, go out for dinner. Wow, you're already cushioning the impact so well, huh? Shakira.
Thank you, Raymond. Basically, this is what you have to do. Normally, I will put myself first. I will put myself in their shoes as a ground worker. How do they
Yeah,
feel? So I would feel the same. So it would be nice to
yeah,
have such bosses to do that for you or with you, right?
yeah. Well, I think you explain a lot of things, and I think you touched on many takeaways. From the aspect of visibility, from the aspect of empowerment, the ability to strategize and to allow the team to have a say and to have the decision made top down, trickle down to the lower levels, and to basically hear them out, right? And they may have their pain points and what works and what does not work. So, like you so correctly said, and these are the multiple issues here. And I think from my experience, dealing with things like this, and a lot of these things are to do with policy and governance, right? And you wonder why are we even doing it, but it's part of the policy and governance. We got to do it, and it's just a waste of time, but I still have to do it, right? So in as a concept, it's easily said, we just do less, achieve more. But how do you not do less? Because you just have to, right? So that's a big challenge there, right? And Afizal, you added on as well. You said internal, external parties or focus are not there, so things are not so defined. So again, there's lack of direction, lack of guidance, lack of clarity. So that's quite similar to what Shakira you mentioned as well. So good. So that's the idea. I wanted to hear both sides of the coin. It's nice to just have these takeaways, but sometimes they're not so ideal. But it is important to understand, because there's one thing that we must understand, that agility can thrive if there is minimal waste, right? I mean, if you are doing things you're not supposed to be doing and you're distracted, it only means that your velocity will be compromised. That means your outcome will be compromised, because much of what you're spending your time 8 hours a day was not dedicated towards achieving that desired quality outcome, because of those distractions, because of the processes, because of that impediments and all those things, right? So that's something to think about. Okay, good. And let's get on to the last one before we take our next break. Our key takeaway 12. Okay. Have a read at this. 10 seconds. So this is the difference, right? We're talking about organizational issues versus individual issues. Now let's understand what the difference is. This what are the things that we talk about as under organization issues. We talk about things like rigid processes, processes that are just too rigid. It just doesn't serve our interest anymore. Poor appraisal system, maybe lack of leadership, ineffective decision making, bad policies, poor governance, right? These are examples of organization issues. Individual issues are examples, could be maybe employees, bad attitude, maybe even lazy, indiscipline, lack of skills, lack of experience, and so on and so forth. Now, this whole concept actually came from Edward Deming again. And in fact, I mentioned about him earlier on in the earlier slide. We talked about PDCA, right? And he actually said something, and I wanted to ask you this question, and I would like you to put it on the chat. Now, if you take 100%, right, 100%, right, how many percent do you think the issues are coming from the organization, and how many percent coming from individual? Just your opinion only, okay? And then I'll let you know later what Edward Deming said. So on the chat, if you can just key in, let's say, for example, I might say, I just want to influence you. I might say maybe, I don't know, 50% organization, 50% individual. What would be your thinking? Okay, maybe you can estimate, Diana. What do you think? Doesn't matter. There's no right and wrong. Everyone, try and see if you can just put your response here. Abizal, Wendy, Pan, Jess, Fu, Honey, Crystal, Dora, Efna, Kyrie, Ingfat, Mirul, Miles, Liying, Nodli. Okay, so we've got some answers coming in, but just give a guess, doesn't matter. So Diana, you said 70 to 80% coming from organization issues, 70-30, all right, Norishima, that's your view. So more of the organization issues, 60-40 from Hasik. Okay, still favoring organization has the bigger issue, right? I think I see 3 of you saying that in your answer. Okay, all right, the rest of you, I think you probably agree with them, I believe. Okay, it seems that most of you are agreeing on the fact that organization issues are more significant than individual issues. And that's exactly what Edward Deming also said, except that he said it's 94% coming from organization issues. Can you believe it? 94% of issues are coming from the organization level, and only 6% are attributed to individual level idiosyncratic factors, improvement, and so on. So you're not surprised. Okay. So what he's saying is that if at all we are focusing on any improvement, focus on the organizational issues first, because you are likely to solve some of the individual issues in the process. Okay, if that is what we want to focus on. All right. So that is that. So I think we've got some sort of alignment here. Fizal, you said, I also think that organization issues can be due to individual issues. Yeah, I mean, organizations are made of individuals anyway. And when we talk about organization, we're talking about those individuals who are in the leadership, right? So naturally, they're individuals, but those in the leadership are the ones we are referring to, right? They always say the change begins from the top, right? And then it cascades down. If there's the right culture, the right value system, you always find that, you know, it sort of permeates downwards quite well. The right policies, the growth mindset always starts from the top, right? Then it cascades downwards. Hi, Afizal, welcome back. Okay, we've got Shakira message on the chat. Agile estimation using story points. Okay, you put something on the chat. Huh? No, I would not agree with that way of doing it, Shakira, because of the association of points with time. That I would not agree. Certainly, there are better ways to do it. It's not a very great cheat sheet, I would say. As a matter of fact, I disagree with this actually. Because the association, if you make points with time, you go back to the same issues I've highlighted earlier. The idea is to move away from time, but you can work backwards once you've worked out the story points, and then you can extrapolate the time, but not a direct correlation like how you have shown in your answer. All right, so welcome back, everyone. I would want to continue from where we left, and we can actually finish well before 1. Actually, we'll have a break earlier. We're ahead of time. Okay, so we were at here, and just to recap, I think we want to do a quick recap. And I think the best way to recap is for you to basically look at all the 12 key takeaways and tell me, how would you rank it if you were to be given a chance to decide what is important and relevant to you? What would be that? How do you rank the key takeaways? That's what we're going to do right now. And we will use a tool called Mentimeter for that. Not to worry. All you need to do is to use your mobile phone. And I will show you that link that you need to go to. So what we're going to do now, you're going to rank it. That means all the 12 key takeaways. It doesn't mean the first one is the most important for you, right? It could be maybe number 5 is more important for you, or number 5 is more useful for you, and you think number 5 was great and it's something that you can apply readily. That will be number 1 for you in your rank. And likewise, you could apply that in that descending order. Okay, so that's our exercise. You're going to help me to rank it, and we're going to use Mentimeter. So I'm going to share that link now. You can use your mobile device. Okay, it's coming up now. Okay, so I believe you're able to see my screen. Can you see my screen? Let me try again. Are you able to see my screen where the link is on the top? Okay, so what you do, thanks Raymond. What you do is just go to menti.com on your Google Chrome in your mobile device, and you type the code that you see up there, 88237521. The moment you do that, you can get into this Menti and you can help me rank it. I've jumbled up the order. You can decide which is first for you. So I know there are 12 of them, so you have to carefully decide for yourself. Just your opinion. You don't have to follow the order that I have up there. You can decide for yourself. One person has shared, 2% now. 4% shared. Number 9 has gone from the lowest to the highest. Team strength based on 3C. Okay, any more response? Let's wait another 2-3 minutes at most. From here, I gather customer is always right. It's not a popular phrase for most of you. Any more to go? Let's take another 1 minute. Customer is always right. It's gone right bottom. Okay, doing less, achieving more. And just for your information, the company that I have set up, Agile Consultancy, this is our slogan. Doing less, achieving more. All right, so 9 of you have completed. Any more to go? Okay, 10. Okay, another 30 seconds. All right, it's interesting to see that you have rated team strength as the most important thing. And I'm not so surprised because, after all, what are we if not for the team, right? Absolutely. Okay, it's between doing less and achieving more, and team strength appears now. All right. So that's nice because I want to then take on the next exercise, which is connected to this. Because remember, if you look at the list here, there are actually many of these things which I consider as zero cost, low cost or zero cost, really. And if there's something that you can do when you go back or propose this to your management or to your immediate line manager, what would that be? So the top three, I just want you to think about that, the top three, because that will be the next mentee exercise. What would be your top three, right? So you just have to probably decide on the number instead of typing the whole thing. Then you can, put it up, the top three. What would be your number? So you decide before I move to the next screen. So I suppose if you had put, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you put here first, second, and third, there'll be a top three to implement, right? Because to implement, it may be not so easy, even though you like something. Because going back home and implementing, say, for example, are you done? Even though it's number 11, if you ask me, that's quite easy to do, frankly. Just a matter of having a checklist, then you're done, even though you put number 11. So there are certain things that can be easily done, some of which may take more time and effort because it's at the policy level. So you can't just introduce anything you like, right? So I'm going to flip the next. Have you thought about your three top ones? Okay, you have. All right, I'm going to switch the screen to the next one. Okay, so now just insert top three takeaways that you can readily implement within your team and organization. I think you have only three options, three answers that you can add on. You could just put the number, actually. You don't have to put the whole sentence. So if you remember the three numbers that you have entered earlier, do you want me to go back to the previous one, or you're okay with that? Yeah, okay, I'll go back. I think some of you are asking me to go back. So what I'll do is I will go back, and if you can decide on your three numbers, I repeat, these are three takeaways that you can readily implement. It doesn't mean what your top three is, right? My question is, which are the ones you can readily implement that will be almost low cost or zero cost and without any resistance from your management, because they will like it anyway. So what will that top three be, right? This was the list that you have. So decide on the three numbers, right? If it's, say, for example, number 11, it's what you think you can do. But frankly, I think that's not easy to do, not so easily, at least to start with. What would be that for you? So jot down in your mind three takeaways that you can readily implement, say, in the next couple of weeks. Okay, are you ready? Can I switch on to the next screen? Raymond, okay? Okay, so if you decided on a 3, now you can enter your 3. Okay. Okay, none of you have responded. Got a lot of ones. In fact, number 11, many of you have responded number 11. So that's the biggest number that's coming out. Number 9, 3 as well. Okay. Any more coming up? 9 of you responded. Okay. All right. 11 is still leading the way. 3 is next, and then followed by 9 and 10. So what are those we can see in a while? I'll flip back to the earlier one. 11, 3, 9, and 10. So let's look at those. 11, 3, 9, 10. Any more? Okay, I think we can go and look at what those are. All right, 12 of you. Any different? 11, 3, 10 and 9, or 9 or 10. Okay, let's see. So it's 11. Most of you said 11, which I completely agree. Are you done? That's quite easy to do. 11.3, reduce complexity. Yes, I agree. This is actually fairly easy to do because all you have to do is to make sure you use the right tools like Kanban or Trello or Jira, whatever, help you increase visibility. 3, doing it first. Yes, this is within the team's control. The team can start doing something without having to do excessive planning. That's good. And 9, yeah, team strength. That means increasing that what Shakira said, that team ownership, that cohesiveness, the team spirit, along with trying to increase their capability and capacity. So, all right, very good. All right, so we left off with this, remember? Before we left for lunch. And a lot of you have voted for doing less, achieving more as your key takeaways. And that's actually very interesting because what it means is you need to then look at what you can do more that brings value and do less of things that bring less value, meaning inefficiencies, unnecessary processes, steps that are probably repeated, ineffective approach, and so on, right? That's what we mean. And the second most voted key takeaway was on team strength, the triple C, which is great. To me, that's another good takeaway because you can quite clearly now see that these things, if done well, can improve the velocity of your team. And again, what is velocity? The capacity to do things. The higher the velocity, the more the capacity to do things, right? And reducing complexity by increasing visibility, that was the other one that most of you voted for. Productivity is not necessarily working harder. That's nice. Meaning we need to then decide what to do and what not to do. All right, so that's what we did. And we also then talked about what would be your 3 takeaways that you can readily implement. Right, so that was what we just did. Now, moving forward, I like to do a small demo to all of you. And this time I will be using a tool, and this tool is called Trello. Can I just check how many of you have heard of this tool, Trello, or have used it? If you can just acknowledge yourself on the chat. Have you used this tool before? It's spelled as Trello. Ah, Diana, you have. Okay, so maybe we can hear from you, Diana, in what capacity you have used, if you do not mind unmuting yourself.
So
Akira?
sorry, is my microphone working?
Yes,
Yeah.
very loud
Yeah.
and clear.
I don't directly use Trello, but we have one department that uses Trello actively to keep track of their projects. So I don't deal with
Okay.
it directly, but I've heard about it.
Okay, so they use Trello to keep track of their projects. That's interesting. And any idea if they've used it for an Agile project?
No. Even the term Agile is completely new to me. So I was curious.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to find out more.
Okay. So the thing is this, a lot of people have done these things in one way or the other, but do not necessarily call it as Agile. And I think when you're hearing to here today and you looked at the 12 key takeaways, you would have probably thought, oh, okay, we've been doing this anyway. So yeah, in a way you have been doing it, but probably not termed as such, right? Kyra, would you mind sharing what you've used it for? If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so basically, I'm a developer, so I use it in my previous organization for a software development approach.
Yeah, so software
Yeah.
development is classic, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, and they use Trello all the way, right?
Yeah. Also for the bug fixing, we use Trello.
Okay, all right. Not tools like Jira, but they use Trello, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Akira, you heard about it but not used it. Okay, so I presume a lot of you have not quite used Trello, nor have you heard much of it. But this Trello is a type of Agile tool, right? And there are many of those such tools. The other being Jira, and of course you have Azure Cloud if you are using a Microsoft-based type implementation. But let's probably use Trello because I find it very easy to demonstrate some of the things that we learned today. So I'm going to share my screen, and Trello is very easy to set up, right? So if you can actually have a free account, Trello.com, and you will be able to set up an account in no time. But in the interest of time, I would go through a demo with you and for you to have a look at. Okay, so this is our Trello view if you were to log in. And I've created a new workspace. That's because today's talk session is on agility at workplace. So I don't want to mix up with the others. So I am now creating a new board. So I call it, probably is the same name. Okay, and okay, I'll just probably keep it as workspace, meaning all members in the workspace. If I add them into the workspace, they can see it. If it's private, then only those in the board can see it. So you can think of private being the most restrictive, right? Because it limits only to those you add. Oops, I should have clicked OK. Okay, if you want to create with a template, you can. There are lots of templates, but I'm just going to make it simple today, and I will click create. All right, so by default, you have some cards already loaded on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add a team, right? So the easiest way is to go and share this board. And in this board, you can add a name and you can basically add persons and decide whether you want them to be a member or an observer or so on. Say, for example, if I were to add myself, there's another account of mine. Yep. So if I want this person, which happens to be me, okay, so I can decide as a member, right? Because I have a free account, so I can do only limited stuff. So I can share, right? So meaning this person will be now a member of this board with limited access, of course, but he or she can do most of the things. All right, so that's how you add team members. Now, obviously, you want to create a backlog. Remember, I used this term backlog. So I'm just going to call this a backlog. So what is a backlog? A backlog is nothing but a list of things to do, right? A list of things to do. You can think of your backlog as your scope of work. All the stuff you need to have in your project is in the backlog. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to probably, I probably call this, because I want to simulate a project, right? And we all, I want to make it simple, and that a good project could be a wedding project, right? That's wedding, planning for a wedding, right? So a wedding, planning for a wedding, okay? Okay, so that is a project that I'm going to work on. So I'm going to add a few things into my backlog. Say, for example, you want to do a bit of, let's say, set a date. That's one. Need to set priorities, set budget. So these are things you would do, right? Use wedding party, find a venue, maybe book a wedding planner. You need help, find a florist, maybe find a caterer, find a photographer, find a wedding dress. Ladies need that a lot, right? Then you want to book a DJ or a band. Then decide on deco. Of course, you want to plan a honeymoon that comes along. And book a cake. Book honeymoon flights and hotel, right? Okay, so let's say this is a list of stuff we have. So of course, sometimes we decide whether we've got it in order. So maybe I think budget could be up here. I can reorder the, find a venue. Okay, let's say maybe I think I might want to add one more. Brainstorm for inspiration and ideas. Okay, so this could be done much earlier, right? So I'll move this card up. Can you see? So what's actually happening here is I am doing what's called as prioritization. And remember that this backlog is a prioritized list. And this list can always change, right? As new input come in, maybe someone might say, hey, Sanath, you forgot about reserving venue for ceremony and reception. Okay, reserve venue for ceremony and reception. So it can grow for sure, and you decide when it should be done. And you accordingly move the order of the card in the order of priority, right? And of course, how do you decide which is of priority? It's always a combination of urgency and importance, right? Something that's urgent and important is done much earlier compared to one that is probably not urgent but important. Okay, so this is our very basic list. Of course, there's much more that goes into wedding planning, but for the sake of today's demo, let's stop at this. Now, we want to start with a backlog. Okay, and what I will do is I would create something called a sprint backlog. Now, remember, a sprint backlog is going to be a subset of what you will do in a sprint. So you have a lot of stuff in your backlog, right? But obviously you can't do all. So you might want to decide to do a subset. So I would move some items here. And if you notice, I'm moving what's on the top of the backlog, right? And that's pretty obvious because you would want to do what's of high priority first, right? So let's say I decide to do this, okay? And this backlog is what I'm going to start doing in the first sprint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this sprint 1. And sprint 1 would start from 15th of May, which is coming Monday. Let's assume we've got about 2 weeks to do what's on the sprint backlog. So that's between 15th of May and 29th of May. And the goal of this sprint is, let's say, key priorities. I'm calling it key priorities. Right. So I've decided now in the first sprint, I'm going to do this much. When I say I've decided, I'm assuming there's a team involved. Could be your friend, cousin, brother, sister, whoever's going to organize this wedding. The team will decide that given their time and their capacity and their capability, they want to do so much. So we're assuming that all the family members, friends, cousin, brother, sister, they're working. So this is like a part-time thing. So they figured out that, well, the wedding is after all only in December, say, for example, we can just do just 4 in the 2 weeks time. We can manage that. Okay, great. So this is what we have. And assuming if I decide to do each one, I will move it. So inside each card, you could select the member is going to do it or the person is going to do it, right? And you can obviously also put the date. You can decide by when you want that done. That's possible as well. And if you think you want a bit more detail, say, for example, this is brainstorm for ideas and for inspiration and ideas. You want to have a checklist, for example. Remember I said about definition of done earlier? So this is what you could do. You could say, okay, look for ideas by contacting Arun. So Arun has recently conducted one. So you want to get some ideas from him, for example, and read or skim through wedding planning websites. Okay, that's the other one. And you could say, talk to Aunt Mary, for example. Aunt Mary is experienced. She has many children. She had many weddings conducted. This one you want to talk to. And yeah, maybe we'll stop with 3. So meaning to say, if you have completed brainstorming and inspiration for ideas, it means that these 3 must have been checked, and checked, right? So that means that you have actually finished it. Then you know you're done, right? So that's the idea of definition of done. We talked about this earlier as well. Okay, so you see, I've done it for 1, right? Similarly, I have to do it for the other 3 more. I've assigned a person, I've got a date, I've got the checklist, but I won't do it now for the sake of time. So I'm just going to assume that all this is all complete with the checklist. And when I'm ready to do it, now who will move this card? You think? Who will move the card? This is going to be done by this person, right? Assess. Who's the assess? Point your Sanath. This is my other account, right? So this person will be doing it. So if this person is going to do it, the moment this person is ready to do it, he has to move this card to the doing column, right? So that's what's going to happen. And when this person is complete, he or she, in this case, he will move it to done. So that means this is done. This is done. Likewise, the next person who is responsible will move it here and move it here. Now, Trello will trigger email notification to all members and inform them that someone has moved the card, for example, because you're all part of the same project, right? So this, can you imagine, creates a lot of visibility. We talked about that earlier. That was the first key takeaway, right? Visibility. We talked about using tool that's visible, and this is so visible. You can't get any more visible than this, right? So easy. You know that this person's doing it. You got the dates all set, and you have moved. And then you do the same thing, and then you move it. Right? Now, the moment you finished all of that, if you recall, I said one thing in one of the key takeaways, you will demonstrate this to the stakeholder. You want to get feedback, right? So this is 2 weeks have passed, and you want to get feedback. That's the idea of just having it over 2 weeks. And you present your findings to, I don't know, maybe your mom and dad, and run through the ideas with them and say that we have looked at these places, these things, and we like this. This is pretty cool. And we think this is the date that we should have this particular training. This is the budget that we want to have. And our priority is to do it this way because this is going to be the most impactful event for our lives. And we just think this is the best thing to do. So you get feedback, right? Get feedback and ideas come through. And in the process, what happens is you get new inputs, and they'll probably tell you, no, you might want to look at this and you might want to do that. So which means what? Guess what? We still have to go and look for more ideas because we got more ideas from the floor. So we will move back, maybe this brainstorming back to the backlog, back to the sprint backlog, actually, because it's not done yet. The stakeholder said, no, I think you still have to do a bit more research on it. So why did I move back what was supposedly completed? I move it back to the backlog because it's not done, right? But maybe the next 3 items were considered done. They agreed on the budget. They said the date's fine, the priorities are good, but we need you to get a bit more ideas on how to do this. So try and do a bit more research. So that's fine. That's really part of getting feedback, right? We did say customers always right. So here is where the feedback is always welcome. So now we are moving on to the next sprint. So 2 weeks has passed, we got feedback, and we basically took the feedback into account, and we're going to work on some of it as well. Now we come to sprint 2. Okay, we're moving to sprint 2 now. Okay, but what should happen? I just made something out. The team should undertake a reflection on how they did for the first sprint. So what we will do is we will go to the plus sign here. If you can see where my mouse is, I will go to the plus sign. I will look for a template. I will explore a template. If you click the explore template button here, I will look for a template called Team Retro. Team Retro. I found one. I'm going to use this template, and I call it Team Retro for Sprint 1. Now, what is a retrospective? It's a time for us to reflect on how we did for the last 2 weeks. That's exactly what it is. Okay, so you notice now I have got another board. So I will just remove some of the other boards, other cards that I don't need. All I need is just 3 things. I only need what went well, what to change, and action item. That's it. That's all I need. So for the first sprint, if I reflect what went well, well, we managed to look at loads of options that went well. We met up and had an exciting time. It was great. But what to change? Maybe we need to delegate our task better, and maybe we need someone to verify the figures, because we just got everything from the website and sometimes it could be wrong. So we want to, change the way we do it. We want to verify the figures. An action item, maybe for the next sprint, we will assign one person to verify all that we see and get from web sources. So there'll be one person assigned, and we will create a task assigned to one person to do verification work. Okay, so that's what we're going to decide on. Okay, great. So this is so important, ladies and gentlemen, if you observe what I'm doing now, because a lot of times I notice people keep doing, they just move the cards and, everything becomes so mechanical. But, the idea and the spirit of agility is that there's always learning at the end of the sprint. So it's fine that you had a demonstration, you talked to your stakeholders, you got feedback, that's good. But what about the team themselves? They must learn something. And that's the purpose of this retro that we just did. It's actually very simple. A lot of people I know, including companies that claim to be doing agile work, do not do this. And I've seen this in many instances in the visits I've done for my coaching. They don't do it, unfortunately. But it's so simple to do it, and yet so powerful, right? So the idea is not to, we make mistakes, but the idea is not to repeat them. And that's what that's what we're doing here, right? So great. So that's the first sprint is done. So we have done something, we've got some feedback from our stakeholders. In this case, stakeholders are the parents, right? Whoever's funding and all that. And we basically learn something by doing the retrospective. Okay, cool. Now, just to simulate another sprint, I would want to add sprint 2. Okay, now sprint 2 is going to start obviously after sprint 1, right? So assuming today is already 29th of May, I've done all. So I'm going to start sprint 2. Let's say we give ourselves a break. So we start on the 5th of June to 19th of June. That's about 6 weeks. Okay. So sprint 2 will be moved here. And now notice in my backlog, there's already one item that was pending, that was considered not done. Now, this is what I meant earlier, right? Remember I said about productivity, just not about doing, but it's about achieving the outcome. So we here find that this brainstorming for inspiration and ideas that you see here in the backlog, which was supposedly done in sprint 1, but not considered done because the stakeholders felt that we have not done enough work here. So we move it back to the backlog. And therefore, we can now add, after this, more items. Because obviously, we need to add more, right? Because if we don't add enough, then you will take forever to finish all this, right? So let's say we are focusing on this 4. Okay, and likewise, you will do what I said. You will go and click each card. You'll assign a member. You will assign a checklist. And in fact, you can even attach attachment. For example, you get a waiting code or you have a price code, you can attach it here. And some people even have labels, maybe you want to have a label for the bride responsibility, another label for the groom. right? So that's interesting. You can have nice color coding. You can see, wow, okay, there are a lot of blues and they're not done because these are the groom and this for the bride, that sort of thing, right? All this is possible. So likewise, assuming we have done the brainstorming, we have chosen the wedding party, we have found the venue, we have booked a planner, okay, all this is being done by different people, assuming, and they take about 2 weeks, assuming before 19th of June, they would have completed all of that. And you see, the beauty about this is that everybody is seeing what everybody is doing, right? And supposing I know someone is busy and say, hey, can I do this for you because we have not finished? And this is where the team spirit is. We talked about the 3C, right? And we work together as a team. As long as our target as a team, we want to finish all this by the 19th of June. So excellent. So by 19th of June, I have completed everything. And what happens next? I have to present it to the stakeholders again to get feedback, to get confirmation, to get input, because ultimately the ones who are funding must know, must give their blessing, must give their permission for us to move. And then after that, what will happen again? We come up with another retrospective here. This retrospective will be for sprint. So likewise, that's what's going to happen, right? And in that retrospective, you learn what were your mistakes, what went well, what could have been improved, what action items, like you see here. So this cycle will continue and continue and continue and continue. And there may be 3, 4, 5, 6 sprints, depending on how much time you have and how much work you have in the backlog. So the more items you have in the backlog, the more sprints you will require. But on the other hand, you must also be conscious that you can't keep creating backlogs. Sorry, you can't keep creating sprints because you must know the due date for the wedding itself. But since the wedding is only in December, in my assumption here, then we do have time, right? We can have sprints every 2 weeks because you have many months to go. So that is the spirit of understanding the whole thing. All right, so I just want to check with you on the chat. Any questions so far? Of course, I'm showing you only a glimpse of what even Trello can do. Trello has something called the power-ups. If you see my icon here, the power-ups are basically very clever plugins that can integrate with your Google Calendar. You can have loads of nice features, reminders, and so on and so forth. But by default, in the free version, it allows you only one power-up. But if you want to add on more power-ups, then you will have to pay for it. But I think for most instances, the standard one is okay, right? Except if you're doing a little bit more advanced work. For example, I know one organization that I've seen, they do Trello really well, actually, very, very well. In fact, I don't mind quoting them. It's a good thing, right? We're talking about what they do very well. And TNB, in fact, TNB does it very well. And I know we've had trainings for them and I've seen what they do. They do Trello work really well, extremely well. Okay, Wendy, thank you. No question. Appreciate the demonstration. Yep, thank you. So there's a lot of things that can go on, but I just want to make it simplified in the interest of time. All right, but what I also want to show you is, if there are no questions on Trello, if we can move on. Afizal, yeah, absolutely, you can try this in your company. Absolutely, in fact, you should attempt to do it in a project. Even better, right? Let us know how we can help you on that. But you see, what is very important, this is what I always tell people, tools are just tools. And if you do not use the tool in the spirit of agility, the tool will not give you much value. And in fact, one of the courses I do is on Agile mindset with Jira. And Jira is the other tool I'm going to show you now very quickly. You see, the focus is on Agile mindset, right? You can use any tool, doesn't matter. But if you are right, if you are aligned with the mindset, that's what we want. Okay, we've got someone, UEM. Currently, I'm using Jira. Okay, so we have got a Amirul here who's a Jira expert. Okay, good. Great. So if there are no questions, I shall move into using or showing you Jira. Any questions? Anyone else? Amirul, sorry. Glad you said you're using Jira. How long have you been using Jira? Since 2020. Okay, that's some time. That's great. So since we're talking about Jira, I may want to switch our attention now to Jira. Okay. Now, this is a project that's involved in. So you can see now there is this Jira is a tool, right? So you can actually do much more. Jira is much more powerful, hands down, much more powerful than Trello. And by the way, both Trello and Jira is owned by the same company, that's Atlassian. And I am blessed to be appointed Atlassian community leader for Malaysia. So we do conduct sessions for public on awareness of using Atlassian tools. So this is a simple example, okay? This is like the high level roadmap, right? You see the big picture. It's not a Gantt chart, but it gives you an idea of when these broad features are going to be completed, right? So you get an idea, like for example, you're looking something, this project is over, so you can see all the dates are, in the past, right? So you can see all of that. And you have a backlog here. You can see the backlog is so rich, right? So much nicer. You can see this is sprint 2, this is sprint 3, this is the backlog that's coming up. There's so many items here that we did, so much of requirements, so much of work here, right? And, maybe I can just pick one. Let's say I pick one of this. Okay. Can you see there's a checklist here? This checklist is like the definition of done, right? So you can, for example, if you say that you have posted, then it must be validated, and each post must have the minimum criteria. You've got the same thing you saw in Trello, remember? In Trello, I also showed you the checklist, and you also have it here. And of course, there are much more than that here, which I won't show you because of the complexity that it may bring. But you see, in active sprints, you can see almost the same thing, right? You can see the to-do, in progress, and done. And you can see, these are the people that's already in the project, and they are responsible for different cards because their name is there. The signee, you can see the signee there, and you can, in fact, each card is tagged to an epic. Epic is a higher level requirement. So for example, if this one that I'm seeing now, this is part of a higher requirement. So the color tagging shows you the link between what you're doing and a higher level requirement. And of course, Jira being Jira, there's loads of different charts you can show. This becomes very useful to report to your management, to show the status of your project, the health of your project. That's very clever, right? So Jira allows you all of that. And of course, you can do much more, right? You can even show retrospective. Remember, I talked about retrospective, and you can even do your very own retrospectives. Okay, this is nice. You see, in this retrospective, you can look at things like what you start doing, you stop doing, what you continue doing, and so on and so forth. Right? So yeah, Shakira, basically, Jira is definitely more thorough, more detailed. It's really meant for active project management work, and surely there's a lot more features here, and because it's meant for a different purpose, right? And there's clever plugins too. Like I can use user story map to show the link between different stories, and you can see the correlation between all of that. It's a nice, intuitive way of seeing things, and you got story map to show you a different presentation of different aspects of your cards. It's quite clever, actually. You can see how the cards assemble itself. Right, so that's a lot of things you can do with it. All right, so a question, Amirul, how do you use story for Agile, and do you include story points for each story too? So yes, so if you are doing it in the right spirit of how it should be done, you will find that each story will need to be assigned a story point. Now, how do you assign a story point? Basically, you will go into the story and you will assign a point. Can you see there's a point here? Too. So the point is for you to indicate the effort that's involved. Right? So that is the purpose of the point. So we were talking about a few things since this morning. We started off looking at the history of Agile, looking at where it came from, looking at what is Agile, and so on. And then we looked at the key takeaways. We spent the whole morning right up until 12 and closer to 1 actually. We had our break at about 12:30, and we finished 12 key takeaways. And when we came back, we also looked at a few things. We looked at how do you rank it, right? You ranked it according to what's important for you. And you also shared in the word cloud what would be your easiest low-hanging fruit. That means you can readily implement it without much issues, much challenges. But now my question to you would be the other way around. Now, if you were to go back and talk to these things to your superior, to your immediate line manager, and tell him or her that, perhaps we should consider these things moving forward. It's good for the company, it's good for the team, it's good for productivity and all of that. What do you think is going to be the challenge you will face? What are the challenges you will face or potentially face, you think, if you were to talk about these things I suppose talking is fine, but if you were going to implement it, what would be the challenges you might face? So that is the exercise right now. And I'm going to share the Menti link right now for you to share your thoughts. Now, this is important because I suppose the very purpose of learning is to implement it, right? Maybe not now, but in the near future. So I thought it would be nice if we knew what would be the challenges. And I can share with you some ideas on how to address these challenges, given my involvement with other companies. Okay, I hope you can see the screen right now. There's a link that's on the screen, menti.com, and that's the code. You can use your phone if you wish to. Okay, we've got some answers coming up. I see someone mentioning mindset. It's a big one. Some who talked about fear, organization issues. Well, that's a lot of that, right? Insecurity, the readiness to change. Okay, so let's take another minute before we wrap this up. Some mention about old method to new, low morale. Nice. And I like to point out also things like fear of change. Okay, there's a lot of, I think this word change has been used more than once. Unwillingness to change. Someone said Um, identifying bottlenecks. Okay, is it a bad thing or what? I'm not sure whether that's the case. I mean, they don't want to identify bottlenecks. Okay. All right. So there's a lot of things that's come up, and the reason why I wanted to do this, because the next session, the next little exercise is to do an evaluation of your organization's agility, right? So this exercise is setting you up for that little exercise. This time we will do it on a Google form. I will be sharing a link with you, and this is just purely your opinion. It's not going to represent the company or whatsoever. And don't worry, I'm not capturing any company information whatsoever. We're just doing an exercise, and the results are not shared whatsoever. And just for your information, right? It's just an exercise. We're doing this for an awareness exercise today. So thanks for your sharing, and maybe just one or two takeaways from this exercise. And I noticed a lot of you mentioned about resistance and change and the fear and so on. Usually when people talk about this aspect of change, it's always the fear of the unknown, right? Not sure, not knowing what's coming up, even if they know it's going to be good for them. That's the thing. Even if they know it's good, they know agility at workplace is something good, but because they're so set in the way they always do what they do, this fear of moving out of their comfort zone can sometimes be seemingly perceived as more painful than the potential benefits. So this is why you see all this coming up. So let me now share the link with you. The question is, where do I start? So there are loads of tools and training. Today's session is in fact one of such things for you to kickstart your Agile journey. And the other being to get the support, right? And we are here to support you. And eventually, I suppose across the organization, you want to get everybody onboarded slowly and surely. I've had a few good use cases with some companies where initially we started off with the initial team, the project team, and then it scaled up to the senior managers, the product owners, product managers, and then we did sessions for even the C-level executives. So it takes time, give yourself time, this evolution and the journey to get people into the Agile we are working will take a bit of time. But of course, the best approach, if you ask me, is to start from the top. If you have leaders who are aware, in fact, I have one request to conduct a session for leaders. We call it Agile leadership. And that's interesting if that comes up, because leaders are the first to embrace this idea, right? And we talked about organization issues versus individual issues. And surely if leaders themselves align and they embrace the spirit of agility, then it's easier to trickle down to the lower part of the organization. So on that way of thinking, I just want to share with you some of the learning pathways that you might want to adopt. And the learning pathways are catered towards various needs. Obviously, there are some people in the organization who just want to get a bit of idea of agility, understand agility from a very fundamental point of view. We've got that for them. And we also have certification courses, and there are many certifications out there, and one of which being the PMI ACP, which we conduct. So through GemRain, we conduct this PMI certification exam course. And this is by far the most prestigious Agile certifications in the world. But more so, I would suggest for those who are practitioners, sometimes you want to get people who can do Agile work, practitioners, and that is the track we have for them. Agile Project Management in Practice. That's a flagship program in itself. We've rolled out a dozen times and been hugely successful because people can apply Agile right after the training, right after the get-go. And we also have Agile mindset with Jira, as you have seen the tool. Remember, we're not selling the tool. We're not vendors, but the emphasis is on using agility, the ideas and principles of Agile, using a tool like Jira. That's the idea. That's the focus of that session, the training. And of course, moving forward, remember, things does not happen only with training, right? You've got the coaching coming in, so that's the coaching bit. And we also have sessions for leaders, and I've mentioned that as well. And this session will be geared for leaders to embrace the mindset of agility. So putting together all of that, give you an idea. I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds for you to skim through the details of each of them, just for your idea. All right, so that's a bit of insight for you. Now, just moving forward in the interest of trying to understand the big picture, so I just want to share with you this. If you are starting off in your journey, you're doing Agile, right? So today's session will give you that insight. Hopefully you get on, you inspire people, you have training conducted in your company, you are going to execute some of the Agile practices, and you are doing Agile, you are at the first phase. Over time, and you start integrating agility in what you do in your day-to-day operations, it becomes a bit more of a norm, then you're being Agile. And much later, as this permeates across the organization, it becomes part of the DNA of the company. Then you're talking about Agile way of working or agility at workplace, and that's the Agile mindset we've been talking all about. So the phase one, as you can see, phase one, training happens at that level. In phase two, we combine coaching and mentoring. In phase three is enterprise coaching, because you're looking at enterprise-wide work. So typically companies that adopt Agile transformation, they get into the enterprise coaching exercise. Now that you've seen these courses, this is a bit of insight on our side. Supposing if you were to be given an opportunity by your organization and they come back to you and say, you know what, funding is not a problem, and all you need to do is decide which 2 courses would you like to do. If you had the chance to decide, what would be the 2 courses that you will decide? So you have seen the list and you probably have something in mind.